some reminders of what we're doing here. We're seeking to discover one narrative for God-honoring sexual stewardship that sufficiently speaks to the many stories in your youth group, including those who experience same-sex attraction. And we're also seeking to equip you with the understanding and skills to minister to those who experience same-sex attraction. And that second point is really what we're focusing on today: how to respond compassionately, effectively, when someone does come out to you and shares with you that this is a part of their story. A quick note here at the beginning. If this person you're serving is experiencing clinical levels of depression, anxiety, suicidality, trauma, etc., really encourage you to collaborate with a clinical mental health professional to encourage, connect that person with someone that can get them some help. I often heard my pastor friends talk about the kind of the police department versus the SWAT team, or the everyday cop versus the SWAT team member. And pastors, youth pastors, have a good amount of depth of training in a lot of different things. But sometimes you need to bring in the SWAT team. Sometimes things are at such depth and severity and like immediate importance that you need to bring in someone who has got even more significant training in some of these specific issues. So really encourage you to do that. Part of my story was meeting with a counselor for 2 years, and it was really helpful for me, and only strengthened my faith and continued to point me towards the goals that I had. So that can be a positive influence. All right, so first I want to start with what our posture ought to be. So even before we talk about what we ought to be saying, what kind of questions we might invite this person to consider with us, what is our heart condition? What is our posture towards these people that we're serving? First, I want to encourage you to choose to be sensitive to the stories and experiences of LGBT people. You can do this in a couple of ways. One, I discourage you from tokenizing them. What do I mean by that? So I have some friends who are well-meaning, but they are often searching for, I want to have at least one homeless person that I'm ministering to consistently, and one LGBT person that I'm ministering to consistently. And they make that this list of, they want to have one of each to kind of check off these boxes. So the motivation is not that they're really genuinely interested in being friends with this LGBT person. It's just they think that they ought to be ministering to an LGBT person. So I encourage you to seek out friendship and relationship with those people who you have common interests with, and you would be friends with them regardless of whether or not they are an LGBT person. And then if they happen to be an LGBT person, love them well and come alongside them in that too. Encourage you to appreciate what is unique about their experiences. For me, it was really meaningful a couple years ago when I was sitting down with a guy who's now one of my roommates and sharing with him about my story and talking about a couple things. And he reflected back to me, Peter, I've heard you share about your story over and over again. I've known you for 4 or 5 years, but I don't think I'll ever appreciate how hard this is for you, and some things that are unique about your story and the challenges you faced. And that meant a lot for me to hear that from him. A guy who I think I really honor the way he's going about sexual stewardship in his life and considering celibacy or marriage, and then now is engaged with taking marriage really seriously and sees it not as a fun thing for him to have to make him happy, but sees it as a vocation and a lifelong job. He's being employed essentially with his spouse. It's going to be really hard. So it meant a lot to me to hear that from him. And then as well, we talked about in that first session about term mirroring. I think that's another way we can respect or be sensitive to the stories of LGBT people. Second, I want to encourage you to demonstrate safety and empathy by inviting people to share their stories and listening, and not responding first with any ultimatums, but just trying to get to know their story. And what I've seen, even when I was younger, even starting in the beginning of college, I had some pretty significant homophobia. I really disliked LGBT people, despite the fact that a lot of the part of my story was experiencing same-sex attraction. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But when I came to develop some friendships with some LGBT people in my life and heard their stories and heard that they're not sexually disobedient people, but people who are hurting just like me and had gone for some different solutions. Or often, most of the time, had much less resources than I had to steward this well. I've seen that I've been very blessed in what I've been surrounded by and the support that I've had in my journey. And I don't know if I would have made decisions any differently than that person if I'd had their story. But as I listen to their stories, then I could grow in empathy to what they face and why they make the decisions they've made. And I think a big part of this is trusting the Holy Spirit. That our job is not ultimately to convince people and to change their minds about everything. I think it's to walk alongside people, to love them well, to seek their goodness, to hold them accountable in areas that they've asked us to do so, and then trust that the Holy Spirit knows the best timing for all things, and He is in control. And to be patient. It may be 10 years, it may be 20 years, it may be 30 years until it's the right timing and someone comes around on some of these things. I even think about this with the friend that I shared about at the beginning of this session. Patience and trusting the Holy Spirit is I think, the best strategy for now. Because he knows what I believe on this topic. I don't need to tell him, but I can love him well and wait. That's hard, though, particularly people you care about, people you love. You see again here this deep dive icon, growing in your familiarity with the stories of LGBT people and also exploring God's posture towards marginalized people, specifically in the Bible, towards sojourners, widows and orphans, but then how you can generalize that to marginalized people today as something that you can do with Equip if we were to partner together. All right, and third way I encourage you to think about your posture in these conversations is to avoid forced choice moments, okay? So it may be tempting that when a person shares about their same-sex attractions or shares that they're considering to seek romantic relationships with people of the same sex, to kind of put them on the spot and say, it's time to choose. Choose God, or choose this gay identity and these gay relationships and this gay culture that perhaps you've identified with and provided you comfort and belonging for a while. And I don't think that's a really good strategy to create those moments, because more often than not, they're not going to choose God. Because at least the church, as an attempt to reflect God, has not reflected God well at all. And what they see as being offered, the church or the gay community offers something much more good. At least that's what appears to them. So instead of creating these forced choice moments, I encourage you to, and particularly if this is a youth and someone who is just now starting to make sense of these questions, to say, hey, why don't we just, for now, kind of default option, choose to steward your sexuality according to a traditional sexual ethic. You may not believe in that yet. You may think that's unfair. You may not like that. But let's just, for now, let's assume that that's true and make decisions according to that. And then let's patiently explore God's call to sexual stewardship. Give that person time and space to ask questions and say, I don't like this, and say it doesn't make sense, and this is not fair. I think they'll really appreciate that time. So, turn and talk. Many find it difficult to maintain this environment of sensitivity, safety, empathy, and patience because of messages like, if I do not condemn, I'm condoning. So I'd love for you to share with the person next to you, where does this come from? This, if I do not condemn, I'm condoning. And are you comfortable resisting condemnation and instead trusting the Holy Spirit?